55 plus communities might not be as ideal as advertised. You need to educate yourself as to what might be the pitfalls that surround many of these communities. Here's what we're going to cover in this video. Things you need to consider with 55 plus communities. And this is what you need to know to avoid the pitfalls that can be costly to you. I really want you to be aware of what's involved with living in a community. I don't want you to have to move again in 6 months or 12 months just because you're unhappy. Here are the 8 significant problems associated with 55 plus communities. The last 2 are something you absolutely need to keep in mind. So knowing these will help you avoid potential regret for you. And that's what I want you to avoid. Number 1, you have to understand the rules and the regulations. Before buying, you want to get a copy of the budget, the board meetings, any covenants, because each community has its own set of strict rules that residents must adhere to. So potential restrictions on pets, size of pet, type of pet, number of pets, vehicles allowed, number of vehicles allowed, type of vehicles allowed. What about RVs or boats or boat trailers? Are they allowed and for how long? And what about even kids and how long can they stay on the property? And is there a limit to the number of children? This holds for guests too. So, and are there fines if these rules aren't adhered to? All key questions. Number 2, you never see grumpy people on brochures. Many new residents discover that their neighbors are not quite as pleasant as they expected. 47% of a survey indicated dissatisfaction with at least one neighbor. And the survey is American, although surveying 281 people in communities. Not everyone's a happy-go-lucky type. And unhappy individuals moving into a community can exacerbate local tensions. So the study outlines some of the behaviors people complained about and found intrusive. It's rude behaviors, grumpy, obnoxious, creepy, overbearing. Being unhappy to begin with isn't solved by moving to a close-knit community. Number 3, social dynamics in a retirement community. Neighborly discontent we just talked about. Well, the social environment in 55 plus communities can be challenging, contrary to popular belief. Residents may encounter cliquish behaviors, kind of like what high school dynamics were like, and conflicts may arise due to bullying and jockeying for social status. So not all residents are friendly and some can be negative or even rude. So that leads us to number 4, romantic expectations. 55 plus is not a dating app. The notion of finding love in a 55 plus community is often exaggerated. The imbalance in the male to female ratio may hinder dating prospects. Women outnumber men typically 3 to 1. Residents shouldn't expect the community to serve as a matchmaking venue. And the reality of community dynamics often falls short of romantic expectations. So keep that in mind. So stick to the end when I will go over the last 2 reasons that are critical to consider before you could decide to move into a 55 plus community. And that leads us to number 5, retirement communities in the news. Crime and community safety is really paramount. And people move to these often gated communities because they think they're more safe. But are they immune to crime? The simple answer is actually no. In the US, there have been 55 plus communities that have been busted for drug rings and golf chop shops inside some communities. Yep, it's true. And there are property crimes, domestic crimes, or violence that can happen in these communities as well. So keep that in mind. Residents can face issues like property crimes that are common in other neighborhoods. So they're not excluded. This misconception that these communities are completely safe is misleading. Awareness of potential safety issues is important for prospective buyers. And that leads us to number 6, lifestyle and politics and social tension. Political divisions can create significant tension between neighbors. We just need to look to our neighbors to the south to actually see that playing out. Communities may experience conflicts fueled by differing political beliefs. The social environment can become hostile, particularly during volatile times. So alcohol consumption is also another thing to consider, and it can actually further exacerbate these tensions. And you've got to consider lifestyle and culture is important to keep in mind. You know, the expectation of a fun, very social lifestyle may quickly become actually tiresome for some people. Not all communities prioritize relaxation and quieter lifestyles. Understanding the community culture is important before making a move. You want something that fits your personality and goals. And now this brings us to our last two items that are really key to consider before you move into one of these communities. Number 7, what about the management of the community? You know, many residents feel abandoned by their developer after the sale of a newer development, leading to dissatisfaction. The developer painted one picture, the reality actually turns out to be another one. And this is all due to ongoing management of the community. You know, many have constant turnover of management staff. This leads to disjointed management decisions and things slipping through the cracks. So management is often like a captain of a ship. If the captain keeps being replaced, the boat and the crew don't have a clear direction and agenda to go by. So management is one of those really critical things that sets the tone. So ask questions like, how long has that manager been in their job? How long did the previous manager work there? Do managers move around a lot within this company? What have been the increases in fees over the last 3 to 5 years? Knowing this is critical for planning your finance. And this brings us to our final point, number 8, additional costs for amenities. You know, financial concerns regarding additional fees. You know, monthly fees can become burdensome and increase over time. To have the amenities like a pool or pickleball court or other courts is great. But what happens if over time you decide not to use them in the future? Is there a clubhouse? What about having to use the clubhouse and the expectations around that? I heard about a couple who found that people were getting up in their face because they weren't using the clubhouse and using the dining room in the clubhouse. And they found it much nicer to dine outside by themselves. So see how costs of amenities are structured. Are they a separate cost? Are they mandatory? Or can you stop them for a time or altogether? You know, have you ever heard of fees ever going down? I haven't. And there's no cap on fees. It's not like rent control here in Ontario. So do they rise at the same rate as your monthly fee? Residents may feel forced to pay for amenities they no longer use. So at first they move in and they love it. Later may not be the case. So understanding the rules and regulations beforehand is really essential to avoid surprises down the road. 55 plus communities are just that, a community. Understanding the culture, the rules, the regulations, and what are the people like can make a transition a whole lot easier and far more enjoyable for you. So these communities definitely have a role, but they aren't for everyone, definitely. And ask about the finances of the community. That's key. Ask about the management and turnover rate. Ask about amenities and how they're looked after. What's the culture like within the community? Asking these questions will give you more idea if this is the right fit for you. If you want to know how to prepare for moving into a 55 plus community and getting rid of all the stuff you've collected, watch this video, No One Wants Your Stuff. Well, thanks for watching. I hope you found this informative. I'll see you in the next video.